Welcome back to the Homeowner's Handbook. I'm Bruce, accompanied by Trevor, and today we'll be giving y'all some information about different pipe types that you will come across. All right, Trevor, let us know what kind of pipes will we see within a residential home, and are there pros and cons to certain types of pipe that we might run into?
So in a residential home, there's different parts of the plumbing system that have different types of pipe. On your water system, most commonly, you're going to have copper or PEX. In older homes, very older homes, you'll often see galvanized. On the drain, waste, and vent system, you're going to basically have cast iron or PVC. And then on your gas system, most commonly, it's going to be steel black piping.
So, Trevor, when it comes to the stuff that we have here on display, are there any pipes here that are outdated or that you really won't encounter in the field anymore?
With the piping we have on the table, you're going to encounter all of these. As far as the fresh water, the domestic water system, you're mostly going to have copper in your older homes, and then in your newer homes, you're going to have PEX. So here on the table, we have the red and blue. Yeah, those are PEX. Pros to those is they're a lot more flexible whenever it comes to freezing weather, hot weather, heat, expansion, contraction, and so forth. Those can actually freeze in the event the weather's bad. That piping will expand. And then once it thaws, it'll come right back down to its normal state, which is a mega plus for homeowners. Copper piping, it's great stuff, don't get me wrong, but whenever it does come to freezing weather, when copper expands, it's going to split and then cause damage, inevitably.
Which one's copper on that table there?
Copper is going to be this one here.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Understood. The copper colored one.
Yes.
I understand. And tell me about this last one here, this big black pipe that we're looking at.
So this is black steel pipe. So that's ran in natural gas, propane gas systems. Super durable, super long lasting. It's a great piping that's been around for a long time and hasn't gone anywhere compared to like the domestic water and the sewer systems. So that's kind of the old faithful. Me as a master plumber, highly recommend this. There are certain homes that are trying to incorporate a flexible gas piping system. Mm-hmm. It's a little more complicated because it doesn't hold up well during lightning strikes, believe it or not. The flexible piping, I never recommend ever, honestly, because of that. I've seen it with my own two eyes. Lightning strike hits a house. A lot of electric systems are bonded to the gas piping system, and whenever that surge happens, it can actually cause pinholes in the flexible pipe, which can engulf in flames. And if you're on natural gas or a propane system, that is going to be a blowtorch in the attic, and I've physically seen it like catch houses on fire, which is super scary. Black steel pipe's durable. You can kick it, throw it, trip over it, anything you want, and really it's not going anywhere. So super cool stuff.
So let's start with, I think you called it PEX, didn't you?
Yes.
Let's start with the PEX lines here, Trevor. What are we looking like price range? Are those cost effective? Are they a little more on the pricey side?
PEX piping is definitely more cost effective when it comes to the material and the labor. The material is cheaper because it is a plastic. It's made with resins, and it's just a lot cheaper than copper. And then whenever it comes to the installation of it, you can actually install that a lot faster than you can copper, because with PEX, depending on the type of PEX, you crimp or you expand the pipe, which is a lot faster, versus copper, you're having to prep, clean, use flux, and then solder the piping. So for me to install a T or a 90 on a PEX system is going to be a fraction of the time it takes me to install a T or a 90 on a copper system.
Makes perfect sense. I'm going to ask a question that I'm sure majority of the homeowners are wondering while we're talking about this right now, why would I install copper at this point versus installing PEX? Like, what is the pro to installing copper instead of the flexible, cheaper, and easier to install pipe?
To answer your question, copper's been around a lot longer, so some people who have been in the game a while, or builders who have been building for a really long time, prefer that, actually, just because it's the old faithful of the industry. And commercial especially, they're still using copper quite a bit. In commercial, most time it's because of diameter of pipe. Once on PEX, once you get up to 1.5 inch, 2 inch and higher, it's not quite as effective when it comes to the labor. It's almost the same. And then in commercial applications, you like really straight, square pipes. And as you can see, the PEX, it kind of bends and it's a little more malleable. But in a home, there's really not an advantage to copper, honestly. I think the advantage is going to be PEX, no doubt. PEX isn't corrosive like copper. Texas has really hard water systems, and that hard water bonds to copper, which causes corrosion buildup, which will slowly erode and eat away at the pipe from the inside out, cause pinhole leaks. PEX doesn't do that. So,
with that being said, do you see that on the PEX lines as well after install, or is that just a copper thing?
It's really just a copper thing. Same thing. It's the hard water. It's the calcium in the water that creates corrosion. And then in copper, the flux. So the flux is a bonding material that we use inside the fitting and then on the outside of the pipe before you solder it. In the event that that fitting isn't cleaned off thoroughly after the joint is soldered, that actually turns really green and hazy and just really makes the pipe look gross.
So from the sounds of it, sounds like it's just preference to use copper, and some guys that just want it to all look seamless, if you will just go back with the same material versus installing the new modern PEX piping.
Yes. I mean, full transparency, if they're using copper in a residential system, it's just an old school approach. That's, I think, literally it.
So we've got a couple pipes on the table that we haven't mentioned yet, which are the white ones sitting up front, PVC. PVC is generally used for drains. I know we see it in our sprinkler systems. Is it common, or would you ever see fresh water from a water heater ran in PVC?
For a water heater specifically, no. So we have two different types of PVC here. One is white, like a bright white PVC. The other one has a yellow tint to it. So, yes. So the white one, that's PVC, right? So a lot of times you will see that in an irrigation system. You'll see it occasionally in a water service to the home. Water service being from the water meter out front to the edge of the foundation. Occasionally you'll see PVC ran there. I don't recommend it. A lot of times you'll see that outside of city limits where, codes aren't heavily involved. They're not getting inspected by city inspectors and so forth. It's just not durable. It doesn't handle well with ground shifting. Texas soils move a lot because we have really dry, hot summers, and that ground it'll start to separate. I mean, we've all seen the big cracks in the ground and everything. And as that ground separates and pulls apart, PVC, it just doesn't handle it well. The fittings will break. The pipe can separate from the fittings, cause leaks, inconveniences, and so forth. So that's why a lot of times we'll run the PEX or poly. Another thing is PVC comes in sticks of 10-foot or 20-foot sections. So at every 20-foot interval, you have to put a fitting, which is put together with glue, literally glue and primer. So just durability at the end of the day is not there. PEX, we can buy it in 20-foot sticks. We can buy it in 100-foot rolls, 300-foot rolls, and so forth, to where if I have a city water meter, I can run one single piece of pipe from there to the edge of the home with no fittings, which is a mega plus for a homeowner in a water system. And then whenever it comes to the ground, pulling apart, heaving, contracting, so forth, that pipe's going to have a lot more malleability in it long term. Then CPVC, the one with the yellow tint to it, You will occasionally see that in homes. A lot of mobile homes, especially on the hot water system. Hot water really makes that CPVC brittle, and I see that piping split, crack. Even if like I've had to make repairs and you go to cut it and it splits it, another 6 inches below. It's just super sensitive, and you don't want that. I wouldn't want that in my house. I don't think you'd want it in yours. I see a lot more damage than good. So that's kind of the prime differences there.
So in what case would you use the CPVC?
In plumbing on a new build, I think the only reason you would use it is if they specifically spec'd that out and just that's what they wanted. There's not much rhyme or reason. I mean, it may be a little cheaper than copper, but still not really. When it comes to PEX systems and CPVC, the price difference isn't going to be the same. You don't really often see it. You'll see it in pre-manufactured homes, trailer homes, stuff like that. It's going to boil down to cost, and then, the person installing it. A lot of mobile homes are built at a plant, so it's not necessarily licensed professionals installing the systems. So it's just the craft isn't fully there or invested in.
Understood. So great value PVC is what I'm hearing.
Pretty much. The only thing I see a good use for it is on water heaters. All water heaters have a temperature relief valve. It's just an emergency drain if the heater gets too hot, and it just discharges out to the edge of the home, comes out of the brick or siding and dumps into the yard. And the reason it's okay there is because it's not supposed to be used unless there's an emergency. And then if it is, it's a drain, so it doesn't hold pressure at that point. It's just relieving the water heater, dumping out to the yard, so that never builds up pressure. It's just a sleeve essentially.
A little pass through.
Right.
Some pros and cons of each pipe, kind of what each pipe does. What does it look like as far as compatibility? If I have a copper system in my house, but PEX is cheaper to put in, am I okay putting PEX on top of copper? Or any type of mixed variation that we have on the table here?
Absolutely. You can adapt and transition piping, with the exception of black steel, in a water system pretty much any way, shape, or form. So if you have a copper system and we need to make a repair or cut out a 10-foot section and replace it, it's very common to go from copper, replace that section with PEX, then back to copper. Again, due to pricing and durability, it's just as good, if not better, of a repair doing it that way. You would never use black steel on a domestic water system because black steel rusts. So in the event water is ran through that, it's going to no doubt rust away. You could run a bathtub and have rust colored water coming out, rust chunks coming out, which is super unhealthy, super terrible, and it's not even an option.
From what we have on the table, Trevor, which one of these is the least corrosive pipe?
Out of the pipes we have on the table, the PEX, CPVC, and PVC is going to be the least corrosive because they're all plastic and resins. Calcium, the hard water, it doesn't bond to that. It bonds to copper. So to answer your question, the plastic and resin ones, which is PEX and CPVC and PVC.
So we've talked about durability, how long things last. Are there any pipes on this table that would reduce any running water noise?
Copper is going to be the least noisy water piping. PEX, you can hear that. Out of all of them, I mean, on a water system, to be honest, none of them are super noisy, but of these, copper is the quietest insulated.
Is it due to the insulation that is generally around copper piping, or is it just a smoother transition from piece to piece?
So the insulation is going to blanket that pipe and make it more quiet. Of these, copper is definitely going to be the most quiet, and that's just because of how rigid it is compared to PEX. Water doesn't seem to make as much noise in a hard, durable pipe compared to PEX or PVC. But all in all, none of them are very noisy.
So I live in a newer home here, obviously in Texas, and they installed nothing but PEX throughout my entire home. Is that a common thing? Can you do that everywhere, or there's certain areas or jurisdictions that won't allow you to use certain piping that's here on the table?
Yes. So PVC is going to be our most restricted pipe because of the temperature ratings that it can handle. So you're not going to use PVC inside of a home at all on a domestic water system. Other than that, PEX, copper, CPVC even are all approved piping for water systems.
Okay.
So in a home, you can use anything on the table but PVC and then the black steel pipe. Copper, CPVC, PEX are all approved for domestic water systems by codes in all jurisdictions around here. It's gonna boil down to price at the end of the day, and then longevity of the warranties and everything. You're gonna get the most warranty out of PEX.
Is there anything up here that we can't use for gas?
For gas, you're only gonna be able to use this steel one.
Okay. What about drains?
For drain piping, you're gonna use PVC. Cast iron is still an approved drain for homes. A lot of mansions I've noticed, Highland Park, so forth, they'll actually choose cast iron due to noise. PVC's, when it comes to a drainage system, is more noisy. Cast iron is very quiet because it's a very rigid cast iron pipe, literally cast iron. So it's a lot more quiet. So in high-end homes, I've seen that used as a preference. But otherwise, most commonly, you're going to see PVC in a drain, waste, and vent system in a home.
So Trevor, let's just go down the line if you don't mind. I have a leak in my wall. It's PEX. What does that repair look like? What kind of tools am I going to need? What are we looking like as far as investment and getting started to do a repair with PEX?
So starting with the PEX, to repair that, it's going to be more cut and dry than the others because I'm going to shut the water system off, drain it down, cut out the section necessary, and then I can either crimp or I can expand that piping with a certain tool. They sell crimper tools, and then they sell battery power tools that actually expand that pipe. You have to use the right fittings for it, but it's a lot more cut and dry. I can cut it out, crimp it, it's done. When it comes to copper, I have to shut the water system down, drain it out completely, make sure that there's no excess water in the line, because on copper, you're going to have to solder that joint. So I have to get all the water out. I have to make sure nothing's dripping whatsoever. Clean that pipe very clean, flux it, solder it, so forth. Whenever it comes to soldering, that's ultimately a huge part of the craft that I really don't recommend trying on a freshwater system because the room for error is slim to none. If you fail, it's gonna leak and cause damage, and then you're gonna be down time and money and everything. When it comes to PEX, it's actually a lot more simple to where if you have the tools, which are sold at plumbing supplies, at big box supply stores and hardware stores and so forth, a good DIY person could cut out a section of PEX, crimp it back together, no problem.
What are we looking like for the investment of a crimping tool? On average, I know they can range depending on what you want to go with.
Mm-hmm. For a crimping tool, on average, say $55 to $120 for a crimping tool. For an expansion tool on PEX, you're gonna be $150 to $250.
Okay, understood. And what about the torch you're speaking of for the copper here? You said flux, torch, and I'm sure there's a couple other things that go in there with it. What are we looking like for a total investment there?
For buying a torch and then all the consumables you need, sandpaper, fitting brushes, flux, rolls of solder, a rag to clean it off after, probably going to be closer to that $200, $250 range for the tool and consumables needed to repair a section of pipe.
Okay. Let's hop into the PVC here. What do I need to be able to do a repair on PVC pipe? CPVC or even your standard.
So on PVC and CPVC, the repair process is pretty similar. You just need something to cut that with, cut a nice square section out, and then that's actually bonded and fused back with primer and glue. On PVC, you use primer and then just regular solvent cement glue. On CPVC, there is a special glue for that, but the process is the same. And it's similar to copper too. So whenever if I have to replace a section of plastic piping being PVC or CPVC in a home, same thing, I have to drain that water system out completely because glue's not going to dry in wet conditions. And then the other downside to it is the wait time on it to dry. You have to wait sometimes 2-3 hours for that to dry to kick that water back on. So it's a little tedious. It's not hard, but you just have to make sure that you do have the right glues, the right primers, and the right cut pieces, and then time on your hands to be able to let it dry.
So as far as cutting tool, let's just say we want to use simple hand PVC cutters, primer and glue. What am I looking like without the fittings, just to get started on what I need to do the job?
For PVC and CPVC repairs, there's several ways to cut it. I've seen people and myself, I've cut it with Sawzalls, which is, $200-$300 investment, depending on the diameter. If it's small pipe like this, you can use, the little handheld cutters, which they might only be $30-$45. As far as glue and stuff like that, you may be looking at another $40, $50.
Tell me about the black pipe here. Not saying that any or all homeowners should do gas pipe repairs, but in the event that I was going to do a repair on my gas pipe, what are some things I would need?
Now, on a gas pipe repair, those are definitely going to be more complex. Highly recommend hiring a professional to do that. With it being gas, there's no room for error there. So on a steel threaded system, you're going to have to cut out a section, and all that's threaded. It's like the old saying, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So whenever you go to cut out a section in the middle of a system, it's not as simple just to thread. You can't just thread it in. So you have to have unions, which are fittings that allow a break apart. It's threaded on both ends, and then it has a big nut in the middle that will unleash and unlock that pipe, so to speak. Or they make press systems for gas, call it mega press, and it's a crimping system. Those tools are expensive. You need a pro press tool. You need the jaws for gas. You may be in the $3,000 range for that tool alone. That you could cut out a section of black steel pipe, drop a new section in, and crimp the fittings. And then for copper systems, they make press as well. That tool, it's going to be a $2,000 to $3,000 investment. And you actually don't have to use a torch and solder. It's pretty new to the plumbing game over the last few years. It's becoming very common practice actually, but it's pretty neat. You can cut out a section of pipe just like the size on here or bigger, and whenever you go back in with that copper, you can actually crimp copper fittings that have an O-ring in there, and that Pro Press tool wraps jaws around it. You press and hold this button, it seals that pipe down. Works pretty well. It's still pretty new to the whole market, so as far as longevity, kind of the test dummies for it to see how long it's really going to last, but it's a pretty neat and efficient system at the end of the day.
All in all, it sounds like these repairs are pretty doable for a member of the Homeowner Handbook.
For the most part, with the exception of gas.
Leaving gas out of it.
Yeah, leave gas out of it.
Don't touch the gas.
No. When
Pass
it comes
on
to
gas.
water pipe, pass on gas. When it comes to water piping, a good DIY person can do it. It's still risky.
So as we've gone through this, and I'm not a plumber myself, so I've known about these pipes, just not so much detail like With PEX, it sounds like it's the holy grail, like it's a catch-all, save-all, the exception of gas, of course. Is there any downside or cons to PEX that we should know about?
So to PEX, really the downside not really a downside, just something to know is that it's not UV rated. So it's not a pipe that you want to leave exposed or can leave exposed to sunlight, because it's going to weaken that pipe, it's going to stiffen that pipe, and it's going to make it more likely to crack. It's just not designed to take on the UVs that sunlight produces. Also on PEX, we mentioned earlier, you can crimp or you can expand certain types of PEX. When you crimp, it's a fitting that goes inside of the PEX. You have usually a copper ring, and you grab a crimping tool and it crimps that ring down around the pipe onto the fitting. On a crimp system, the interior diameter of that fitting is going to be less than the pipe. So it's going to just be a smaller hole that water is funneling through, which can cause some volume issues, pressure issues at the end of the day. When it comes to expansion of PEX, those fittings are actually the same size interior diameter as the pipe. That's why you have to expand the pipe over the fitting. That's actually at Bacon, that's what we prefer to use for that reason. And it's dummy proof too, because on a crimp system, we've all seen it to where you can actually forget to crimp. And sometimes it'll hold for a couple days, a week, maybe a month. And then you find out the hard way you forgot to crimp it because it finally blows apart or starts leaking.
Wow.
On an expansion system, you can't forget. Like it's either on because you expanded it, or it's not on at all. So it's dummy proof.
Well put. And I'm sure everyone's dealt with this at one time or another, but during the wintertime, I'll wake up, tire pressure is a little lower as the day warms up, or even as I start driving, tire pressure starts to climb back up. Do we deal with that with a pipe, especially during the expansion portion of PEX?
So on PEX, there may be a little natural expansion. Like when it comes to hot water always expands, heat expands. So it could have a hair of expansion, not even enough to notice. The big deal is during a freeze, whenever that water does freeze up, it expands as well, and it'll just go back to its natural state. Other than that, you're not really going to notice anything.
So being here in Texas, it's hot. So the PVC issue that we talked about, as far as the connection with glue, generally isn't an issue because it dries pretty fast, especially when it's hot out. What about PEX? Does a cold environment versus a hot environment have anything to do with the expansion of the pipe and how long or short it takes it to seal?
Yes. So on a expansion system on PEX, so I mentioned the tool that expands it, you put it over the fitting. In the cold, it will take a little longer to contract back down around that fitting. Still, it's not very long at all. We're talking, a minute. As far as the heat, it may contract a little bit faster because it's just more malleable in the heat. As far as hot water or cold water running through the system and being in a hot attic, it's not gonna have much expansion or contraction because, especially on cold water, it's cold water running through there at all times. So even if it's in a hot attic, it's still temperature controlled by the water going through it. And then the hot water going through it, it's rated for that. So it's not gonna have much expansion just off hot water. Other than freezing weather, it's not gonna really expand and contract much at all, if any.
So we didn't have a table big enough today to supply all the pipes that are out there in the world, but what else could we run into? Some things that might be common in the plumbing trade or just in a home that you might see in general.
Of course. So on the water side, like I mentioned earlier, in the very older homes, they used to use galvanized piping, which is very similar to black steel pipe. It threads the same, it's the same diameter, but it has a galvanized, it's silver, it's galvanized, and that prevents it from rusting as fast as black steel. But at this point in time, if we're cutting out galvanized systems and you look down the interior of it, for sure it's fully rusted inside because it hasn't been plumbing common practice to use galvanized in so long. When it comes to the drainage, there's a lot of homes that are still cast iron systems. A lot of homes that in the yard there's clay systems, and those are older practices as well. Very durable. It was before PVC came out. And on those, like clay, it comes in 4-foot sections at the time. So, we'll run our camera down the drain system in the yard, and there'll be root intrusions like every 4 foot at every joint. It's pretty wild. And then on cast iron, those came in 10-foot sections. It lasted a little longer. Seems to be about a 60-year lifespan on them. But what happens to cast iron is it rusts away. So a plumbing term is channel rot. The water in a drain system, it doesn't hold full capacity. Drain just stays really on the bottom of the pipe. So whenever we run our camera through a drain system, we'll see that the bottom of that pipe is actually rotted out, and that water is just surfing on, the clay, the Texas clay, or the dirt underneath it. It's still a cylinder, but that whole bottom's rotted out. So that's where like a lot of foundation issues come into play and so forth, because that water is just saturating into the soil under the home. Depending on the soil, as it absorbs water, it expands, which can cause heaving in slabs. Other times it'll wash away the soil, which will cause sides of the home to, fall down a little bit, which just causes an array of additional problems for the plumbing system as that house shifts. So a lot of what we do is, we'll excavate all of the clay or cast iron out, and then reinstall PVC, just not that size PVC on the table, and then go back with that. Non-corrosive. It doesn't break. It's a lot more rigid. We support it so well to where it does handle well with the movement of homes and so forth.
So if I don't know what kind of pipes are underneath my house, what's the best way of going about figuring that out?
So if you don't know what kind of pipes are under your home, there's a couple indicators you can start with. Usually in the flower beds of homes, you'll have a set of clean house is what we call them. It's 2 pipes that come out of the ground, sometimes 1, and it's an access point to where if it ever has a blockage in there, a plumber can come in, run a cable or a hydrojet or something through there to restore flow in that pipe. If it's cast iron in your flower beds, odds are your system's cast iron. If it's PVC, odds are it's PVC. Otherwise, if you're just not sure, you don't have those physical indicators outside, just call a plumber. We can come out, evaluate the system. We can fill it up with water, test it, check it for leaks. We can run our camera through its entirety, look for channel rot, look for what type of pipe it is, condition, and so forth.